After using the last of its strength to jump, the wolf died, however. Damien, who was still on its back, didn't realize this, or even the fact that he was currently falling into an abyss. Just as he was about to pass out after killing the wolf, his consciousness was forced awake by a mind-numbing pain. With this pain came clarity, and while being glad he survived, he also realized that he had eaten huge chunks of the wolf's flesh and meat while he was in his deranged state. Now Damien was feeling the consequences of his actions. He had begun his mutation. Since he had killed the wolf, he knew he had leveled up multiple times. But he didn't know exactly how much since he couldn't focus on the holographic windows that popped up in front of him. Inside Damien's body, mana raged as his organs healed, however, they were immediately crushed into paste right after. This process continued as the essence that he was granted from the rising of his league battled the lightning attribute mana of the wolf that was raging inside of him, frying his organs. Damien felt like he was strapped to an electric chair, only he couldn't die, while simultaneously being struck by hundreds of hammers and needles on every inch of his body. The electric currents raged, leaving him paralyzed so he couldn't even scream out in pain. It wasn't just his organs that were feeling this process, though, as his skin, his bones, and even his blood also started being refined. Throughout all of this, Damien stayed conscious. He could only focus on the pain he felt and the sensation of his body essentially becoming a flesh bag and then being healed back to normal over and over again. Combined with the endless darkness he saw on every side, Damien really thought he might have gone to hell. His body was still straddled to the wolf's carcass, but as time went on, pieces of said carcass evaporated into essence and entered Damien's body. Sensing the current condition of its owner, his void body had activated, devouring every form of energy in the near vicinity. Damien, however, was unaware of this, attributing the influxes of energy as waves of beast mana fighting against the natural mana he gained through his level ups. Seconds turned into minutes, which felt like hours to Damien, and at some point he had stopped falling. His body, which should have been smashed to meat paste upon falling such a distance, actually created a small crater when it reached the floor. Damien still didn't move, though, since his mutation was still ongoing. His eyes, which were always a deep amethyst color, were now mixed with red, and his hair gained some silver highlights and lengthened until it was shoulder length. His canines sharpened as well, while his body, which had remained skinny to this day, began growing some muscle. The biggest change happened in his legs. While on the outside, his legs just gained some muscle and stayed symmetrical with the rest of his body, their internal structure was completely changed. Every muscle, bone, tendon, and ligament was optimally arranged to waste no motion and to prioritize speed. Tufts of fur began growing out of various parts of his body, but were immediately turned into energy by his void body and consumed. A pair of wolf ears started sprouting on the top of his head too, however they met the same fate as the fur. It seemed that Damien's theory about his void body was partially correct. When such a large influx of mana and energy entered his body, it immediately destroyed him from the inside. If his void body hadn't stolen that energy, he would have died immediately. Due to this, he was able to strengthen, while anything excess that was created was turned into energy for his physique. Through his reckless action, he was able to unlock a sub-ability of his physique, though Damien didn't know that. He had expected his physique to consume all of the beast mana, making him go through minimal mutation. However, his physique allowed him to optimize his mutation for combat, while only stealing the excess that was left afterward. What felt like many days later, Damien finally felt the pain recede to a tolerable level, though he still felt phantom pains where his left arm should have been. Even that wound had been seared closed by the rampaging lighting attribute. Ha. Damien caught his breath. The torture he was forced to endure almost made him insane, but now that the pain didn't cloud his mind, he could feel what he had gained. His eyesight had sharpened immensely along with his hearing, and his canines seemed sharp enough to cut his flesh like butter, while his body was on a completely different level. New chapters will be fully updated at the.albin.com. Back on Earth, no matter what he tried, whether it be dieting, going to the gym, or even completing the One Punch Man training routine every day for a week, he was never able to change his build. Now, however, he had finally formed some muscle. Although it wasn't defined yet, he could see that the framework of a proper six-pack had formed. And all it took was eating one wolf and enduring just a tad bit of brutal torture. Damien joked to himself. He could also feel a new sort of danger sense had formed within him, along with a certain desire, however. He suppressed it while remembering that he had just leveled up. He then checked the notifications he got while he was mutating. You killed level Thunderwolf, gained 5,000 EXP, leveled up, leveled up, leveled up, leveled up. You have successfully raised your league for the first time. Through the growth of your legend, a class can be obtained. Choose a class. 1. Swordsman. 2. Spatial Mage. 3. Cleric. 4. Monster Hunter. 5. Explorer. Congratulations, you have successfully mutated. You are the first individual from the world, Earth, to accomplish a perfect mutation. Due to this immense achievement, you have been granted the title, Evolver. Your legend has been advanced. Damien was shocked as he read the messages. Words like league and legend were completely foreign to him, but he mused that it must be the basis on which the system categorizes strength. Checking the class list, Damien felt he didn't even need to contemplate his choices. His biggest strength was his teleportation, and becoming a spatial mage seemed to be a way to expand upon similar powers. Thinking up to this point, Damien didn't hesitate and chose his first class. You have become a spatial mage. During the creation of the universe, the first concepts to exist were creation and destruction, followed by space and time, then life and death. Space is an essential concept in upholding the fabric of reality. You have embarked on a path to discover its secrets. Although he didn't feel any major changes, Damien felt his horizons broaden. The concepts he could never quite grasp and new ideas on how to use his spatial affinity flooded his mind. Choosing his class had somewhat enlightened him, but how he chose to go about using that information was up to him. Unable to hold back his anticipation any longer, Damien decided to check his status. Status. Damien Void. Half human, half beast, male, age 17. Level 14. Spatial Mage. Experience value. 54,500. Title. Bearer of the Void Physique Evolver. Affinities. Space, lightning. Physique, void physique. Magic power. Magic sense. Mastery level 3. Skills. Teleportation level 1. Minor telekinesis level 5. Regeneration level 2. Sword mastery level 3. Danger sense level 1. Damien was ecstatic. Seeing his stats, which had increased more than tenfold, he realized the benefits of evolution. Thinking about the title he gained, he checked its effects, something he's unable to do for his other 2 titles. Evolver. A title granted to those who have exceeded their racial limits without suffering consequences. By completing a perfect mutation, you have acquired the ability to evolve like beasts while simultaneously gaining classes like humans. Damien smiled, thinking that the title was self-explanatory. He had also gained a new affinity for lightning, though he guessed that this was just due to luck. His teleportation skill was no longer short distance, as he could clearly feel a connection to the spatial layers in a 5-kilometer radius. He also felt like he could abuse his teleportation without strain for extended periods of time. Next, he tried to test his regeneration. He went to cut his arm, only to realize that his arm was no longer there. His face turned grim. No matter, let this arm be a reminder of my near-death experience today. I was so confident in killing a first class, only for it to toy with me and almost take my life. I'll find some way to heal my arm later, but for now, I need this lesson. Although he still attempted to joke around, his mind had now completely accepted the situation. After all, he almost died. If he was still feeling even the slightest bit of denial, he might lose his life for real in the future. As Damien's thoughts turned darker, that certain desire rose again. However, this time, he was unable to suppress it. It was a bestial desire that came from the core of his being. A desire that rose to prominence after losing a part of his humanity. A desire felt by all beasts who grow stronger under the system. It was the desire to kill. To kill, to eat, and to evolve. Blood. The cracked stone floors of the endless cavern were being dyed red, and a putrid stench began to suffuse the environment. Most of the beasts on this floor were fleeing in every direction, hoping to find salvation from the predator that stalked them all. Of course, most of them decided to fight back at first. After all, a beast's natural instinct was to kill, eat, and evolve. However, the beast they were up against was too feral. Every beast that attempted to fight was either torn up, exploded, and fried by lighting, or had its body parts mangled mysteriously. This scene had continued for 3 floors already, but the predator was far from being satiated. Whenever it saw any life, it moved to kill. Whenever it felt fatigue, it tore open beasts and ate them raw. Whenever it felt dehydrated, it would drink their blood for sustenance. It didn't seem to care about anything at all, even its own health, as it moved with a singular purpose to bring death. Besides, even if a beast managed to injure it, the beast would rapidly heal. Their strength ranging between levels 10-20 had no ability to resist. The various beasts who originally inhabited the floor had enough intelligence to know they couldn't survive alone, so they teamed up and attacked. A group of 30 beasts altogether surrounded a single one, however. It was the group of 30 that truly felt fear. The beast they were facing had a mane of black hair with streaks of silver, eyes that were a mix between deep amethyst and blood red, swirling in a yin-yang pattern, and a bipedal body that was growing more and more muscle as time passed. This beast was naturally Damien. After Damien's thought process turned dark in the abyss, he lost control over his emotions, inadvertently letting his beast side take over. Without any control over his newly gained bestial instinct, he went berserk and began killing everything he laid eyes on. An indiscernible amount of time had passed since then, and Damien had descended 3 more floors. If an observer was present to witness the aftermath left on those 3 floors, all they would see is an endless sea of blood and mangled corpses. Any beast that escaped his grasp either tunneled into the ground farther than his reach extended or fled to the lower floors. However, most of the latter group still ended up dying by his hand. Even though he wasn't rational in the slightest, he still had all his power. He would teleport freely to cut off any escape routes and channel lightning as if he had been wielding it all his life. He killed, he ate, and he evolved until the floor he was on had no more use to him. Then he descended to continue. Even after all this time, he showed no signs of regaining his rationality. The group of beasts that had surrounded him charged ferociously, as they knew their lives were already forfeit. Their only hope was to take him down with them. But Damien, especially without his rational mind, was a being who was hell-bent on survival by any means. After his near-death experience, this became rooted firmly as the core of his mentality. Those within the tide of beasts that possessed elemental affinities chose this moment to attack. A barrage of fireballs, ice and earth spikes, and even wind blades converged upon his location. However, this was all for naught. Damien had already vanished from his original position, appearing at the edge of the tide. His stance was prone as his nails elongated and became more claw-like. He lunged at a beast and directly tore out its heart, throwing it to the side. He then continued his slaughter. Black lightning danced around his body, increasing his speed 3-fold as he pounced from beast to beast. His movements were completely primal, but looked eerily beautiful as he moved efficiently within a whirlwind of blood. Everywhere he passed, dismembered limbs and random organs of beasts flew. The tide of originally 30 beasts was already cut down by half in just a matter of minutes. The beasts gave up on elemental attacks after seeing Damien avoid them easily, and used their body strength to try and wear him down. Various claws, hooves, and talons continuously fell on his body, accumulating countless gashes. However, it didn't matter. With only beasts of similar levels around him, Damien was nigh invincible. His regeneration was passively healing every injury he received, leaving him without even a single scar. Another few minutes later, Damien had mutilated every beast in his vicinity, even the ones that weren't a part of the beast tide that desperately attacked him. He turned to glance at the dismembered flesh and chunks of organs that laid waste to the originally dry ground, and snorted, continuing to the next floor. After a certain point of continuous evolution through eating beasts, Damien had formed a sort of sixth sense that allowed him to know whether a beast's meat and blood would benefit him. This was why, even in his berserk state, Damien never stayed on one floor for too long. The Damien that almost died on the second floor couldn't even begin to compare with the Damien that existed in the present. With him gaining a surefire method to strengthen his body, and a first class related to his spatial affinity, his full potential was finally unleashed. It was previously mentioned that without the limitations of his body, Damien theorized that he'd have talent that rivals Elena and Jin's. However, he was sorely mistaken. His talent vastly eclipsed both of them, and his spatial affinity was one of the rarest elements. Now that he could follow 2 different power systems to gain strength through evolution and class advancement, his growth rate would hail him a supreme genius. However, Damien was in no mind to care. He continued to kill, eat, and evolve. Every once in a while he would gain levels as well as he continued to descend the dungeon. Damien's main consciousness was currently trapped in a world filled with blood. When his bestial instinct took over, he suddenly appeared here with no idea what was going on. When he tried to move, he had realized that his body was semi-ethereal and seemed to be fading out of existence. He wasn't the only one in this world, however, as he soon discovered an enormous wolf that he remembered killing only a couple of minutes prior. The wolf had charged at him as another harrowing battle between the two began, but just as Damien managed to kill the wolf, which was much weaker than its living counterpart, more and more beasts began appearing around him. Thus, Damien was trapped in a seemingly never-ending battle. Each time he killed a beast, another one appeared without end. He was only given an hour or two of reprieve every so often when his body was descending to a lower floor. With the continuation of this cycle, he was slowly starting to lose his sanity. New chapters will be fully updated at No.v.l.bin. Unbeknownst to Damien, who had no room to think about anything other than surviving this endless beast tide, this world was something akin to his sea of consciousness. Each time he devoured a beast and further evolved himself, his bestial instinct would grow. Each beast that appeared was just a manifestation of this desire. Damien's fight in the blood world wasn't one for survival, but rather a fight for sanity. If he ended up dying to these beasts, he would forever live solely on his bestial instinct. His thoughts and emotions as a human would cease to exist. Thus, Damien continued fighting two never-ending battles simultaneously, one with the goal of evolution and strength, and the other with the goal of maintaining his will. Time passed in this manner as Damien conquered two more floors. Paying no mind to the blood-stricken walls around him, he continued forward to the next floor. This floor, however, was different from the rest. Rather than the endless cavern he had seen up until this point, this floor was roughly the size of a city. Its walls were smooth and lit with what seemed to be primitive torches made by lighting bundles of wood on fire. In front of him wasn't dreary stone with the occasional flora, but a roughly built village. There were indents on the cave floor that seemed to indicate roads and small shacks and huts made of mud and rock placed along the road randomly. Damien's beastly instinct became vigilant. Although he would usually wantonly attack anything in sight, this abrupt change in environment had invoked the natural cautiousness he had inherited from the very first wolf he devoured. As he scanned the place with his spatial awareness, he spotted many small green creatures, the tallest ones being just above 1 meter in height. At the same time, they spotted him. When they did, they suddenly began screeching to each other, seemingly communicating. Then they all grabbed their weapons and congregated around the main stone hut in the middle of the village. Thudding footsteps rang out and echoed through the city as the door to the hut opened. What stepped out was another green creature, however. This one was around 1.7 meters tall and had a round body. Its body was covered in armor made of beast bones, and on its shoulder stood a large battle axe. Cree. It screeched as it looked at Damien while radiating an air of superiority. Meanwhile, Damien's blood boiled. On the past 2 floors, he hadn't found more than 2 or 3 beasts that could help him evolve, and in his rage, he slaughtered the rest of the floor. However, he could see that the humanoid creature in front of him would help him immensely. Sparing no time for thought, Damien charged. With his every movement, space distorted and mutilated the random goblins that were in his path, while Damien's sole focus was on their king. With a bestial roar, Damien stuck his claws forward, attempting to pierce the heart. However, he was immediately repelled. Confused, Damien tried once more, only to face the same problem. Keka kekeki. The Goblin King let out a peal of strange laughter after seeing his confusion. Its skin had a natural property of absorbing and reflecting physical damage. And this is what had allowed him to reign over this floor to this day. One of the king's favorite things was watching its enemies try to breach his defenses, only to achieve nothing. So the king stayed its hand without attacking, confident that it would get to see another amusing sight today. Unfortunately, its opponent was Damien. Seeing that physical attacks were useless, Damien charged lightning in his palms before shooting it forward, trying parts of the goblin's skin. Cree! The Goblin King was enraged. Even if the attack didn't hurt it, it was insulted that the enemy had injured its skin. Raising its great axe, it charged. The goblin swung its axe at Damien with immense strength as Damien quickly teleported out of its way. Appearing behind the goblin, he grabbed its head and ran electricity through its skull. Though the attack didn't do damage, it managed to paralyze the goblin for a second. Using the opening he created, Damien grabbed the goblin's arm and distorted space, using the pressure to turn the arm into a sack of paste. "Kree!" The goblin roared in pain. It had never felt this much pain, as the impact was usually negated when it hit its skin, and it lost the ability to think rationally. It turned to Damien and wildly began swinging its great axe, which Damien dodged with ease. The power has lessened greatly due to the goblin's state of mind, so he felt no danger from the swings. Ducking under the goblin's swing, Damien used another spatial distortion to break the goblin's leg, earning another screech of pain. Although the Goblin King could negate physical damage under a certain level, he could never compete if the environment was the one that deemed him to die. Space was an esoteric and extremely powerful concept, which was why spatial users were generally always feared. Once the goblin lost its balance, Damien immediately grabbed its head and distorted it, leaving it twisted at a 180-degree angle. With its neck snapped, the Goblin King immediately died. When the surrounding goblins witnessed this, their eyes turned red with rage. Screeching at the top of their lungs, they charged at Damien. However, they never stood a chance. Damien simply distorted the space around him, and all those goblins died fruitlessly. His whole focus was on the corpse of the Goblin King. With greed in his eyes, he began to devour. After eating the Goblin King, Damien's body once again went through an intensive mutation like the first one. Although it wasn't nearly as bad, the pain was still immense. Up until this point, devouring beasts had only served to strengthen his body, not change its structure. But it seemed that unique traits that would help him improve would always result in these kinds of mutation. While Damien fell to the floor, his muscles, tendons, and tissue were all being pulled and compressed continuously. When they were finished, they had also gained the property of absorption and reflection that the Goblin King possessed. And just like it did with the wolf, his void physique activated and turned the remains of the Goblin King into essence to aid his mutation. As his body evolved, Damien once again fought the Goblin King in the blood world. This Goblin King, being only a manifestation of his instinct, did not possess its unique trait. With its death, Damien finally fell to the floor. I have no idea how much time has passed since I entered this mysterious space, but I can still feel a connection with my body. During the short moments of respite he had, Damien had begun thinking of his circumstances and had formulated a general idea of what happened. I went berserk. I don't know what exactly is going on, but I'm sure that all the beasts I had to kill recently were already killed once by me. But it looks like the cycle has finally ended. Whatever the immense pain I can faintly feel from the connection to my body is, it's my opportunity to regain control. The evolution process, being a complete change in the structure of his body, would naturally take time to complete. And during this time, Damien meditated to regain control. When he did, he felt the desire to kill that had formulated this blood world. I see. So this whole time I was fighting my bestial instinct. Damien was drenched in a cold sweat. If I had died here, my ego would have been erased. How scary, but that doesn't matter anymore since I've already won. Damien's eyes snapped open. I have already overpowered this instinct. Now all that's left is to force it to submit to my rational mind. As Damien thought this, he released his entire aura and distorted the space around him. This is my mind, my body. I, Damien Void, will never become something akin to a mere beast. Break for me. Damien roared with all his breath as he punched the ground with immense force. Immediately, the blood world began to crack. I will be something even the heavens must look up to. How dare I be controlled by the instincts of a beast? As he had this thought, Damien's view turned black and the immense pain of evolution overwhelmed him.